In the windswept steppes of Mongolia, legends whisper of a secret so heavily guarded that entire armies were sworn to protect it with their lives. The story is older than memory itself, a burial shrouded in shadows, erased from maps, and hidden from history. It is said that when the greatest conqueror the world has ever known, Genghis Khan, took his final breath, he was laid to rest in a place so secret, so forbidden, that no living soul could ever speak of it again. Some say rivers were diverted to wash away the traces, mountains reshaped to conceal the site, and soldiers who carried the secret vanished forever into silence. For centuries, seekers have searched, and yet the tomb remains untouched, unseen, and perhaps cursed. Tonight, we step into that mystery, the legend of Genghis Khan, the man who built an empire. To understand the enigma of the Forbidden Tomb, we must first step into the vast shadow cast by the man himself, Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in the harsh wilderness of the Mongolian steppes in the late 12th century. His name alone carries a weight of awe and fear, echoing across centuries like the distant rumble of war drums. Temujin was not born into greatness. His early life was one of exile, struggle, and betrayal. As a young boy, after the death of his father, he and his family were abandoned by their clan, left to fend for themselves in the unforgiving grasslands. Hunger, cold, and enemies were constant companions. But out of this crucible of hardship, a leader was forged, one who would unite the fractious Mongol tribes and carve an empire that stretched farther than that of Alexander the Great or the Romans. By the time he became Genghis Khan, or universal ruler, he commanded not just armies, but the loyalty of entire nations. His empire stretched from the shores of the Pacific to the Caspian Sea. Cities fell before him, kingdoms surrendered, and even distant Europe trembled at the mere mention of his name. To some, he was a monster, a scourge who left behind trails of fire and ash. To others, he was a visionary, a lawgiver who brought order, trade, and communication to vast lands once fractured by tribal wars. Yet despite his immense power, Genghis Khan remained a figure deeply rooted in the traditions of his people. The Mongols revered the eternal sky, the steppe winds, and the earth beneath their horses' hooves. Life was seen as fleeting, and death was not an end, but a return to the land. It is in this belief system that the mystery of his tomb begins to unfold. According to Mongol custom, the resting places of great leaders were sacred and secret. Graves were hidden to protect them from enemies, desecration, and the curious hands of future generations. For Genghis Khan, the greatest of them all, this tradition was magnified to a scale almost unthinkable. The secrecy surrounding his burial was not merely about respect. It was about ensuring that his spirit remained undisturbed, and that his power in death would not rival his power in life. Legends tell us that when the great Khan died in 1227, his body was returned to Mongolia under the cover of absolute secrecy. Every soldier who carried him, every servant who laid eyes upon his resting place, was sworn to silence or killed to ensure it. Some say an entire funeral procession of thousands was slaughtered so that no one could ever reveal the location. Others whisper that a sacred curse was placed upon the site, a warning to those who dared to seek it. And yet, even with all this secrecy, hints and fragments of the story slipped through time like grains of sand carried on the desert winds. We know that Genghis Khan desired no grand pyramid, no towering monument to his power. Instead, he sought to vanish into the land that had given him strength. But therein lies the paradox. How can the greatest empire builder in history leave behind no grave, no shrine, no marker? How could a man who shaped the world so profoundly slip into death so completely that even the earth seems to refuse to yield his resting place? Over the centuries, explorers, historians, and treasure hunters have scoured Mongolia for clues. Some claimed to have found the valley of the Kentiai Mountains, where he may rest. Others insist the Onon River hides his tomb beneath its waters. But the truth remains as elusive as ever. In the end, the man who united the world chose separation from it in death. His tomb is not just a mystery of stone and soil. It is a reflection of his life, a paradox of visibility and invisibility, power and silence. Genghis Khan became eternal not only by what he built in life, but also by what he left behind in death. A question without an answer, a tomb without a trace. As we begin this journey into the forbidden mystery, one thing becomes clear: the story of Genghis Khan is not finished. His tomb is not merely a burial site. It is a shadow cast across history, beckoning us to follow into the unknown. The year was 1227. Genghis Khan stood at the height of his power, his armies sweeping across Asia like a storm of iron and fire. Cities fell, empires crumbled, and kingdoms trembled at his name. To many, he seemed almost invincible, a man favored by destiny, chosen by the eternal sky to bend the world to his will. But destiny, like the shifting winds of the steppe, can be unpredictable. For even the mightiest conqueror must one day face death. The passing of Genghis Khan is one of history's most carefully guarded secrets, hidden behind veils of myth, silence, and contradiction. No one can say with certainty how the great Khan left this world. What we have instead are fragments, stories scattered like broken shards across centuries, each telling a different tale. And so, as we seek to understand the mystery of his forbidden tomb, we must first explore the mystery of his death. For perhaps the two are bound together, one riddle inside another. The campaign in Western Xia. Most accounts place Genghis Khan's death during his final campaign against the Tangut Kingdom of Western Xia, a dynasty in what is now northwestern China. The Tanguts had long resisted Mongol authority, and in 1226, Genghis Khan marched against them with relentless force. It was a campaign of vengeance, of unfinished business, for the Tanguts had once betrayed the Khan during his war with the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols laid siege to city after city, and by the summer of 1227, Western Xia stood on the brink of annihilation. Yet, in the midst of triumph, tragedy struck. Somewhere during this campaign, the great Khan's life came to an end. But how? Here, history becomes less a record of fact and more a labyrinth of rumor, legend, and deliberate silence. The official account, the Yuan Shi, or History of the Yuan, compiled by the Mongol successors in China, gives the simplest and most direct explanation. Genghis Khan fell ill, possibly from fever, and died. It is a story that seems almost too ordinary for a man of such extraordinary life, a conqueror brought down not by sword or spear, but by sickness. Some scholars argue he may have suffered from injuries accumulated over years of battle. Others suggest typhoid or pneumonia, contracted during the exhausting campaigns. The Mongol armies often moved through harsh terrain and hostile climates, and even emperors were not immune to the toll of long campaigns. And yet, this version feels incomplete. A figure as towering as Genghis Khan rarely leaves history quietly. The silence in official records, the lack of detail, and the contradictions in later sources suggest something more. The fall from his horse. Another tradition claims that the great Khan met his end in a moment of tragic misfortune. During the campaign, it is said he was thrown from his horse and suffered fatal injuries. For a man who spent his life on horseback, commanding armies from the saddle, this story carries a strange poetic weight. The horse was central to Mongol identity, as vital as air and water. To fall from a horse, for a Mongol, was almost symbolic, a reminder that even the strongest can be unseated by fate. If true, it would have been an ignoble end for a man who seemed larger than life. Perhaps this is why the story has survived in whispers but was never made official. It is easier to imagine Genghis Khan dying in glory than in accident. The wound in battle. Still others claim that Genghis Khan was mortally wounded in combat. Some chronicles suggest he was struck by an arrow during the assault on Western Xia. This would be a fitting death for a warrior king, to fall in the heat of battle, leading his men against a defiant foe. And yet, the Mongols were known for their discipline and loyalty. If the Khan had died this way, surely the story would have been immortalized in song and legend. Instead, we find only silence, a silence that seems deliberate. Could it be that his generals suppressed the truth, fearing the impact his death might have on the morale of the army? The tale of the Tangut princess. Among the strangest and most sensational accounts comes from Persian sources, which tell a story of betrayal, passion, and revenge. According to this legend, Genghis Khan had taken a Tangut princess as a concubine during his campaign. The princess, enraged at the destruction of her people, sought vengeance. On the night she was brought to his tent, she concealed a weapon, a blade or perhaps a poisoned needle, and struck the Khan while he slept. This tale has the dramatic flair of legend, with echoes of folklore and morality play. It paints the Khan's death as the result not of illness or chance, but of poetic justice, delivered by a woman who dared defy the conqueror of worlds. But historians treat this account with caution. It appears centuries after the event, and no Mongol or Chinese source corroborates it. Still, the persistence of the story across cultures hints at how deeply people longed to imagine the downfall of such a fearsome figure. The silence of the Mongols. Perhaps the most telling detail is not in the stories we have, but in the silence left behind. The Mongols were a people of strong oral tradition, who celebrated their victories and remembered their leaders in song. Yet, in the case of Genghis Khan's death, the silence is almost absolute. Why? Some believe it was part of a deliberate strategy. The Mongol Empire, vast and diverse, was held together by the sheer force of the Khan's personality. News of his death could have shattered the fragile unity of tribes and nations. By concealing the truth, his generals ensured that the army remained focused, their enemies unaware, until the conquest of Western Xia was complete. Others suggest the silence was spiritual. The Mongols revered their leaders not as divine beings, but as figures chosen by the eternal sky. To speak of the Khan's death was to risk disturbing his spirit, to risk weakening the sacred bond between people and ruler. Thus, silence became a form of reverence, a death shrouded in purpose. What is clear is that Genghis Khan's death was not recorded as an ordinary event. It was wrapped in secrecy, concealed from allies and enemies alike. His passing was not merely a personal tragedy but a matter of state, a turning point for the empire itself. And so, the truth of how he died became the first layer of the greater mystery, the same mystery that would cloak his burial. For if his death could be hidden, then his tomb could be hidden even deeper, lost forever beneath the steppes. In the end, the great Khan's final breath is as elusive as his final resting place. Perhaps he died of illness, perhaps in accident, perhaps in betrayal, or perhaps the truth was never meant to be known. What matters is not the manner of his death, but the silence that followed. A silence that echoes across centuries, reminding us that even the most powerful man in the world chose to vanish into mystery. The funeral procession of shadows, how the Mongols hid his tomb. The eternal blue sky stretched over the Mongolian steppes, vast and endless. The same sky under which Genghis Khan had been born, had fought, had conquered, and had finally died. Now, as his body lay still, the greatest empire the world had ever known faced a question unlike any other. Where shall the conqueror of the world be laid to rest? But with Genghis Khan, the answer was never simple. For in death, as in life, he was destined to remain cloaked in secrecy. The story of his funeral procession is not one of public mourning or towering monuments, but of silence, shadows, and hidden paths. It is a story told in fragments, whispered through time, as if the very earth conspired to keep it secret. The journey home. After the campaign against Western Xia concluded, the Mongols prepared to return their fallen leader to his homeland. His body, carefully wrapped and guarded, was borne on horseback across deserts, rivers, and mountains. Yet, unlike the grand funerals of kings and emperors, this procession moved in silence. No banners waved, no drums thundered, no monuments were raised. The funeral of Genghis Khan was not meant to glorify him in death, but to conceal him. For the Mongols believed that the resting place of their greatest leader should remain untouched by enemies, robbers, or even curious hands of future generations. The procession itself became a shadow army, moving with solemn purpose, hiding their path, erasing their tracks. It is said that the soldiers escorting his body swore an oath stronger than any other, to protect the secret of their master's burial for eternity. The River of Blood. One of the most chilling legends tells of the path the funeral cortege took across the steppe. According to this tale, as the procession moved, every living creature they encountered was slain. Man, woman, beast, or bird. No witness could be allowed to live. No eye could gaze upon the way of the great Khan. The eternal secret. What is striking in every version of the tale is the overwhelming emphasis on silence and concealment. Unlike the Egyptians, who raised pyramids to their pharaohs, or the Chinese, who built vast mausoleums, the Mongols chose to bury their greatest leader in absolute obscurity. No marker, no shrine, no stone to tell of his glory. To some, this seems strange. Would not a man who ruled half the known world deserve a monument that pierced the sky? But to the Mongols, this was not a denial of honor. It was the ultimate honor. To vanish into the earth, unseen, was to return to the eternal blue sky, unbound by human hands. The secrecy of his burial was an extension of his legend. Genghis Khan had lived as a mystery to his enemies, striking from the shadows, disappearing into the steppes. In death, he became the ultimate enigma, a man without a grave, whose presence lingers everywhere yet is rooted nowhere. The whisper of the horses. One of the most haunting details of the funeral procession involves the horses of the Khan. Some legends say that hundreds of horses were sacrificed at his burial, their spirits bound to serve him in the afterlife, just as they had carried him through war in life. Others whisper that the hoofbeats of these horses were used to trample the ground after the grave was sealed, erasing all signs of digging, blending the soil until no human eye could tell where the earth had been disturbed. Even now, some Mongolians say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely near Burkhan Khaldun, you can still hear the ghostly echoes of those horses, galloping forever to guard their master's tomb. The tomb that was never found. What became of the Khan's body after this funeral of shadows? We do not know. Archaeologists, historians, and treasure seekers have searched for centuries, scouring the steppes and mountains of Mongolia. Yet his tomb has never been uncovered, and perhaps it never will be. For the Mongols did not bury their Khan to be remembered with stone and gold. They buried him to be remembered in spirit, in legend, in the very land itself. His grave was not meant to be visited. It was meant to be invisible, a legacy carried by silence. The funeral procession of Genghis Khan is less a historical event than a mythic ritual, half-truth and half-shadow. It is the moment when the greatest conqueror of the medieval world crossed into legend, slipping from history's grasp into the eternal unknown. No one alive knows the true story of that journey. Perhaps no one ever will. But the silence left behind is itself an answer. A silence so profound that it echoes across the centuries. A silence that guards a secret stronger than stone. In the end, Genghis Khan's burial is not only about where his body rests. It is about the meaning of concealment, the power of mystery, and the way legends are born not only in life but also in death. The sacred land, Burkhan Khaldun, and the forbidden valleys of Mongolia. The story of Genghis Khan's resting place is not just about a single tomb. It is about a land that seems to breathe with mystery. To understand why his grave has never been found, we must step into the wilderness of Mongolia, into the rolling steppes, the high mountains, and the sacred valleys where the winds themselves carry whispers of the past. This is a land that is not just geography. To the Mongolian people, it is alive, powerful, and deeply spiritual. It holds the memory of their ancestors, the strength of their traditions, and perhaps the greatest secret of all. Whispers of the hidden tomb. Mongolian legends tell us that after the Khan's death, his body was carried toward Burkhan Khaldun. Thousands of soldiers are said to have marched in silence, their horses' hooves muffled by felt, so that not even the sound of their journey would give away the secret. Some tales claim that rivers were diverted to conceal the grave, flooding valleys so that no living soul could find it again. Others say the tomb was dug so deep into the earth that not even the passage of centuries could reveal it. And yet, in every story, one detail remains constant. The tomb is always connected to this land. The sacred mountain, the forbidden valleys, the eternal watch of the steppe, the spiritual landscape. To understand why the Mongols believe the tomb should remain hidden, one must understand their relationship with the land. For them, nature is not just a backdrop. It is a spirit, a living force. Mountains are protectors, rivers are lifelines, and the wind itself is an ancestor's breath. Burkhan Khaldun is believed to be the axis of the world for the Mongols, a spiritual center where heaven, earth, and the underworld meet. To disturb this balance would be to upset the harmony of existence itself. Shamans still perform rituals here. They leave offerings of milk, meat, and silk scarves to the spirits. Travelers stop to bow before the mountain, circling sacred cairns of stone known as ovu. To seek the tomb of Genghis Khan in this land would not just be seen as an act of archaeology, it would be viewed as an act of sacrilege. The Valley of Death. There is another tale, whispered in Mongolian folklore, of a valley within the Ik that is cursed. It is said that anyone who attempts to enter never returns. Some call it the Valley of Death, guarded not by men but by the restless spirits of warriors long gone. Could this be where the Khan rests, hidden not only by geography but by the weight of myth and fear? Expeditions that tried to enter these regions in the past often reported strange happenings. Sickness, equipment failures, and unexplained accidents. Whether these were coincidences or something more, they added to the aura of danger surrounding the search. The silence of centuries. What makes the mystery even greater is the silence of history. Unlike the grand tombs of Egypt or China, where monuments were raised to the dead, Genghis Khan's burial left nothing. No stones, no markers, no mausoleum. Only the vast emptiness of the steppe and the whispers of those who still guard the secret. Even today, the Mongolian government restricts exploration in parts of the Burkhan Khaldun region. Some of this is for cultural preservation, but some wonder if it is also to protect a deeper secret. Imagine it for a moment. Beneath the grasslands, beneath the soil untouched for 800 years, there may lie a chamber of treasures, armor, and the body of the man who once ruled the largest empire in history. And yet, no one dares disturb it. Why the secret endures? The mystery of Genghis Khan's tomb is not just about finding a grave. It is about respecting a people's belief, a land's power, and a history too vast to be contained. For the Mongols, perhaps the greatest honor to their leader is not in building a monument, but in ensuring that his final rest remains eternal, beyond the reach of conquerors, historians, or treasure hunters. And so, Burkhan Khaldun, the foreign explorers. As centuries passed, the mystery began to lure outsiders. When Europeans first heard of Genghis Khan, they imagined his grave filled with untold riches, golden treasures looted from across Asia and beyond. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers, missionaries, and archaeologists set out into Mongolia, hoping to find what locals refused to reveal. But they found nothing. The vastness of the land was too great, and the Mongolian people too protective of their sacred sites. Foreigners were seen not as seekers of history, but as trespassers. Many expeditions ended in failure, some in disaster. The steppe has always been unforgiving to those who wander without respect. The Soviet barrier. In the 20th century, another layer of silence fell over the mystery. During the Soviet era, access to much of Mongolia was restricted. Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain believed by many to hold the tomb, was declared a closed military zone. Officially, it was for protection of cultural heritage. But some whispered that the Soviets themselves searched for the tomb in secret, hoping to claim its treasures. If they found anything, they never revealed it. The silence continued. The age of satellites. In recent decades, technology has been turned toward the mystery. Teams of scientists and archaeologists have used satellite imaging, drones, and ground-penetrating radar to scan the Mongolian steppe. One ambitious project, the Valley of the Khan's initiative mapped over 4,000 square miles of land. They discovered ancient burial mounds, long-forgotten settlements, and hidden ruins. But the tomb of Genghis Khan remained elusive. Some researchers believe it lies not in a marked grave at all, but beneath a man-made hill disguised as natural landscape. Others think it could be beneath a riverbed, hidden forever by flowing water. And still, the land keeps its secret. Why the search fails? Perhaps the mystery endures not because the tomb cannot be found, but because it does not want to be found. The Mongolian people, for centuries, have believed that disturbing the Khan's rest would bring disaster. Even today, many view the search as taboo. For them, Genghis Khan is not a figure of the past, but a living ancestor whose spirit still guards the land. Archaeologists have often found themselves caught between science and tradition. Should the past be uncovered for knowledge's sake? Or should it remain hidden, as the Khan wished? A tomb without a grave. And so, perhaps the greatest mystery of all is this: what if Genghis Khan does not lie in a tomb at all? Some scholars suggest that his body was left exposed to the open sky, following the ancient Mongolian practice of sky burial, where the body is given back to the earth and its creatures. If this is true, then the Khan's remains have long since vanished, scattered into the winds he once rode. Others argue that the true tomb may not even be in Mongolia at all, that it could lie somewhere in the vast lands of China, hidden during the campaigns that marked the end of his life. There are countless theories, but no proof. The eternal mystery. In the end, the tomb of Genghis Khan may never be found. Not because we lack the tools or the determination, but because perhaps it was never meant to be discovered. The Khan who once ruled the largest empire in human history wished to vanish into the land he loved. His power, his presence, his memory, all became part of the steppe itself. And in a way, perhaps that is the greatest tomb of all. Not stone, not gold, not a mausoleum of marble, but the endless sky, the rolling grasslands, and the mountains of Mongolia. Here he lives on, not in a grave, but in the heart of his people, and in the mystery that refuses to die. Closing reflections. As we reflect on the tale of the Forbidden Tomb, we are reminded of something deeper, that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, that history does not always rest in monuments and artifacts, but in the stories passed down, the silence maintained, and the respect shown to those who came before. The tomb of Genghis Khan remains hidden, perhaps forever, but in that silence, in that unanswered question, lies its true power. It is not just a mystery of archaeology, it is a reminder of the delicate balance between human curiosity and human reverence. And so, as the winds sweep across the steppe, carrying with them the whispers of long-forgotten warriors, the secret endures. A secret that belongs not to explorers or scientists, but to the land itself. The grave of Genghis Khan may never be found, and perhaps that is exactly as he intended. It is said that the earth itself drank deeply of blood that day, as the army carved a silent road across the land. When they finally reached their destination, those who buried him too were put to death, ensuring that no voice could reveal the secret. Was this truth or myth woven by fear? Historians debate it still, yet the tale has persisted for centuries, a haunting reminder of the price paid to guard the Khan's eternal rest. The Sealed Mountain. Another tradition holds that Genghis Khan was buried in a secret valley, somewhere near his birthplace in Khentai Province, Mongolia. The mountain Burkhan Khaldun is often named as the most likely site, a sacred peak that the Khan himself revered in life. According to this legend, once his body was laid to rest, the valley was sealed. Trees were planted over the grave, rivers diverted to wash over it, and the land made to appear untouched. The resting place became part of the earth itself, blending into the wilderness as if nature had swallowed the conqueror whole. In this telling, the Mongols did not rely only on silence or violence to keep the secret, but on the very landscape, reshaping it, hiding the grave within the folds of the mountain so completely that even the keenest eyes could not discern it. The army that never returned. Another haunting tale describes how the entire funeral escort, perhaps hundreds, even thousands of warriors, was sacrificed after the burial. Once they had completed their duty, the men were ordered to kill one another, until none remained alive to reveal the tomb's location. Some say the last survivors were then killed by another group of soldiers, who in turn were killed by yet another, until finally no one was left to carry the memory. It is a grim legend, one that speaks to the devotion the Mongols had to their ruler. Whether or not it is true, it reflects a belief that secrecy was more important than life itself. Burkhan Khaldun, the Mountain of the Khan. In the heart of eastern Mongolia rises Burkhan Khaldun, a mountain shrouded in reverence. According to Mongolian tradition, this was the most sacred place to Genghis Khan himself. He prayed here, he offered sacrifices here, and it is said that the spirits of the mountain blessed his conquests. Legends tell us that as a young man, before he was known as Genghis Khan, Temujin once fled here to escape his enemies. Lost and exhausted, he climbed into the thick forests of Burkhan Khaldun and begged the spirits for protection. He survived, and from that day forward, he considered the mountain sacred, vowing that his descendants must honor it for generations to come. For the Mongols, Burkhan Khaldun is not just a peak of rock and forest. It is a living guardian, a presence that watches over them. It is believed that disturbing the land here could bring disaster. And so, if Genghis Khan wished for his tomb to remain untouched forever, this would have been the place to hide it. A forbidden zone. Over the centuries, Burkhan Khaldun and the surrounding region became more than just sacred. It became forbidden. Ancient chronicles describe an area called the Ik-Korig, or the Great Taboo. This was a vast expanse of land, stretching for miles around Burkhan Khaldun, closed to outsiders. No foreigner was allowed to enter. No commoner could set foot within its boundaries. It was guarded day and night by elite soldiers, descendants of the very men who had fought alongside Genghis Khan. The Ik-Korig was essentially an invisible wall across the steppe. Travelers could pass by, but they dared not enter. The penalty for trespassing was death. Even in modern times, stories persist of people who tried to explore the region only to vanish or meet strange misfortunes. What was being protected in this land? Was it just a sacred tradition? Or was the secret of Genghis Khan's tomb hidden deep within? The endless search, legends, expeditions, and the mystery that refuses to die. For centuries, the tomb of Genghis Khan has been more than just a place of rest. It has been a riddle that generations of explorers, historians, and dreamers have tried to solve. It is a story that winds its way through deserts and mountains, through whispers of folklore and the quiet persistence of science. And yet, after more than 800 years, the secret remains untouched. The first clues, the Yuan Chronicles. Our journey into the mystery begins with the ancient chronicles. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the empire he left behind recorded his deeds in texts like the Secret History of the Mongols and the Yuan dynasty's annals. But strangely, there is no mention of his tomb. The records describe his victories, his laws, even the stories of his childhood. But when it comes to his death and burial, the pages fall silent. Why would the chroniclers omit this? Some believe it was intentional, that the location was too sacred, too dangerous to even write down. Others suggest that the tomb's secrecy was part of the Khan's final command, that he, like the wind of the steppe, should vanish into the land without a trace. The legends of secrecy. Over time, legends grew around his burial. Some say that thousands of soldiers who carried the Khan's body killed every witness along the way, and then took their own lives to protect the secret forever. Others tell of a vast funeral procession that rode through the steppe, trampling the ground flat so that no grave mound could be seen. Still others whisper that rivers were diverted, mountains carved, and entire valleys reshaped to conceal the tomb. It is impossible to know which, if any, of these are true. But what they all reveal is the same truth: the lengths to which the Mongols would go to protect their leader's rest.